Some of you have been faithful, yet you're fatigued. Some of you have been serving, but you're silently slipping away. So hear me and hear me real good. It's okay to stop and pause, to breathe, and to be refilled, because even oil needs replenishing. And so that brings me to the first mnemonic device. Cease over functioning and move towards ease. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, Jesus didn't say perform. He wasn't looking for a performance. He said, come. He wasn't looking for a production. He said, partner. So the first step to avoiding burnout is simply just obeying his invitation before the implosion actually happens. So when Jesus said, come to me, that call was very, very simple, right? But what we found out is the obedience that's the hard part. The obedience is the hard part. Obeying that invitation is very, very hard for some, especially when you've been trained to equate the over-functioning with anointing. And many of us think that, like I said earlier, that the rest is rebellion, but rest is a revelation. And if I could use my spiritual imagination, it seems like to me it's maybe heaven just whispering, you're not the miracle worker, you're just the messenger. But all too often, we're trying to do it all. Clinically speaking, over-functioning, in case you didn't know, is actually a trauma response. It's what we do when we are afraid of what the consequence may be if we don't perform the way we were once used to performing. But then there's the spiritual perspective that I also found out was that over-functioning is also the idolatry of control. So let me be very, very clear, my friends. You can't fix everything. You can only faith through it. And so I would suggest utilizing this affirmation. I'll come to Jesus before I collapse. And the therapeutic truth behind that is that what happens is we start to strive, and striving is often the anxious body trying to prove its worth. Like I said earlier, it's like trying to perform the way you were once performing, and that will always be a benchmark for you. And so when you are unable to function at that capacity, you oftentimes feel shame and guilt. And so you keep pushing and pushing and pushing instead of stopping to actually ask for the help that you so need. But the spiritual truth is stillness, rest, if you will, is a trusting soul remembering its worth. The therapeutic truth is striving is often that anxious body trying to prove its worth. But the spiritual truth is stillness is the trusting soul remembering its worth. You can't expect somebody to remember your worth if you don't remind yourself or them of your worth. So again, he said, come, cease over functioning and move toward ease. Our next mnemonic device strategy would be limit. In Exodus 18, we find Moses he's drained. People are lined up, sun up, sundown. And Jethro, his father-in-law, proceeds to tell him, what you are doing is not good. You will surely wear yourself out. Anybody else ever been there? You doing all the good things, ain't none of it the God thing. Uh, he. I'm sorry. Maybe that's just me. I digress. He wasn't really calling Moses. He wasn't saying that what Moses was doing wasn't good. It just wasn't God. And he wasn't calling him lazy. He was calling him limited. And maybe that's the word for somebody else in leadership today. It was that for me. And so what I found out was that your limitation is not really your liability. It's not a liability. He was trying to do this all on his own. And I remember, if I could share this, my pastor had this really huge task. And he said, Spark, I want you to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I said, okay, Pastor. And what did I try to do? I tried to do that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then it didn't go so well. And when we brought it back to him, one of the things he said was, hey, I didn't say you had to do it. I said it needed to be done. And so my takeaway from that was that delegation is what was missing. I later found out that delegation was also deliverance. You're not disobedient for needing help. You are human. And all too often when people bring us certain tasks or when they say they want you to do something, we're just as responsible for saying, you want it to be me? Or is this to be a team effort? And if I would have just asked that question, I would have been delivered early on. But I wasn't. And so from a therapeutic perspective, what I found was that boundaries needed to be put into place. And oftentimes we hear boundaries and we feel like that's a negative thing. We put this negative connotation behind the word boundaries, but I found out that boundaries are actually bridges and not barriers. They actually make it possible for the grace to keep flowing without drowning in the guilt. I later found out, remember when I said I started working on it and things just kind of started going a little crazy? Because, see, the enemy loves unguarded generosity. You know, the people who give without boundaries. Yeah. He doesn't really have to destroy you if he can simply just distract you and deplete you. And so, again, we're doing good. But is it God? And so I found myself realizing that I wasn't operating in the appropriate stewardship. And see, stewardship is not just about money. It's about the management of our energy, the management of our empathy, the management of our exposure. Every yes, if y'all take away nothing else, every yes that you give must have an assignment, or it will become the assassin to your peace. So again, limit. Learn intentionally while maintaining the internal tranquility. Because all too often we're so busy trying to maintain peace for everybody else while disrupting that of our own. Make that make sense. Truth is, if you don't schedule your sanity, stress will surely schedule it for you. Yeah. Again, I believe in affirmations, and so I would suggest that when you find yourself stuck, when you find yourself unable to actually identify boundaries, if you just whisper to yourself, I've got limits, and that's holy and acceptable. So we had come, which was to cease the overfunctioning and move towards ease. Limit, learn intentionally, and maintain your internal tranquility. And then we get to the rest. Mark 6:31. That's where Jesus said to his disciples, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Now remember earlier I told y'all rest was one of those things that we oftentimes kind of shy away from We feel like we got to keep going. I've heard a couple of people tell me, "Oh, I'm gonna keep going. I'll rest when I'm dead." That's not how that works. Absolutely not. Even the Savior scheduled silence because see, when God rested on the seventh day, he didn't rest because he was tired. He rested because he was finished. Rest isn't a reward. It is literally a requirement. So much so, created a day for it. That means that rest is a sign of completion and not collapse. How many of you at the end of your day say, I'm going to go home and I'm going to rest, but you don't really get any rest? Like, it doesn't feel restful. You can sleep hours and hours and hours, and then you still wake up tired. Yeah. Fell asleep with your mouth wide open. Sounded like you got some good sleep. Woke up mouth dry. Still tired. Oh, okay, all right. I was just wondering if it was just me, and I sleep with a sleep app, and still wake up tired. But when you actually rest, when you're intentional about your rest, when you rest, you're actually saying, God, I trust you. That what's done is enough, and what's left can wait. How many of us actually operate in that capacity? No, nobody. Oh, okay, all right. I remember hearing, and I could be wrong because, like I said, I didn't go to seminary. I'm no, major theologian. But I believe in the good book it said we walk by faith and what? Not by sight. I believe, Adrian, that rest is faith with its eyes closed. We walk by faith and not by sight. Rest is faith with your eyes closed. It's intentional. What I also found out was that God didn't even call the 12 disciples to work even harder. He literally called them to breathe deeper. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. When is the last time y'all actually took a deep breath? And I don't mean like your automatic breathing, that we do that we don't think about. But when was the last time you decided that you were going to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth? There's a couple people that's mouth breathers, a couple people nose breathers. When was the last time you breathed in through your nose and out through your mouth? So let's try it real quick. We're going to breathe in, count to 4. We're going to hold it for 4. And here's the tricky part, y'all. We're going to exhale for 6. Y'all ready? All right. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. How many of y'all finished exhaling before y'all got to 6? 1. Okay. All right. Let's try that one more time. Inhale for 4. Hold. Exhale. That is something that I want you guys to be intentional about doing on a regular. And if I could tie it in from a therapeutic standpoint, your nervous system really cannot heal in the same environment that hurt it. And so sometimes restoration is going to require you to relocate, even if that's just 10 minutes of solitude, right? And so when I said that rest is faith with its eyes closed, and then we did that one little exercise, it's one more that I want to add to it so that you have that tool in your toolbox as well. Um, this here for good saints. I want you to inhale and say, peace of God. Peace of God. On your exhale, I want y'all to say, guard my heart. Because what you just did was you practiced prayer and a parasympathetic regulation. This is something that you can do on a regular, in your home, on your job, in a choir stand, in a pulpit, Sunday school, Bible study. These are things that we need to get familiar with, that we need to actually keep in our tool belt, not in the tool shed, but in your tool belt, so that it's easily accessible in the moments that we're presented with something that is very much overwhelming and very much taxing and very much challenging for us, to help regulate our nervous system, because sometimes we'll feel it physiologically and we have no idea what to do with it when we feel it. And so that is another tip or tool that you can put in your toolbox. That's just a little theology and therapy working together. Okay. So that is your release. When we did our exhale, that was us releasing. We have our release, our exhale, and our surrender and our trust. That's your rest. That is what Jesus wants you to do. So please be intentional about rest. Now here's one of my favorites. You know, we've all been here. This is the halt. Anybody familiar with halt? I know Pastor is, but anybody else? Okay, I see one more. Okay, all right. If we go to 1 Kings 19, that's where we find Elijah under the broom tree. Right? Y'all know the story. He is exhausted. He is suicidal. He is overwhelmed. Lord, I have had enough. Can't do this no more. I'm sick of it. And y'all want to know what God did? I know some of y'all know because y'all some Bible scholars. He literally sent an angel with food and a nap. Yes, Lord. Food and a nap. And sometimes that's what deliverance looks like. It really looks like hydration, delegation, and a whole vacation. Sometimes that breakthrough is in the break. Sometimes we have to break away from the monotony of things. I promise you, it is still going to run in your absence if you have equipped your leaders with what you need to equip them with. If they are equipped and empowered and inspired, I promise you, it can happen. Now, it may not happen the way you want it to happen, but it can happen. When I think about halt, that's the hungry, that's the angry, that's the lonely, and that's the tired. And I'm almost certain everybody in here has felt one of the four, if not all of the four, before. Halt is what we call a self-check. This is where you don't make any major decisions when you're hungry, you're angry, you're lonely, or you're tired. It won't really do you any good. But when I put on my spiritual lens, what I did find out was that even prophets have permission to pause. Sometimes we don't give ourselves the permission to pause. Sometimes we put more pressure on ourselves than our leaders put on us. But I found out all this does is create fatigue. And when it creates that fatigue, if fatigue stays unattended for too long, it becomes an infection. And it's not just an infection of yourself. You begin to infect everybody else. It becomes like a cancer. It's contagious. You don't just lose sleep. you actually lose sensitivity to the spirit. And I don't know about you, but I can't afford to be disconnected. And when you ignore that, right, you're now ignoring the signs that your body is trying to give you. You are literally dulling the discernment of your soul when you do that. And so again, halt. Halt before you hurt. Because hurt people hurt people. All too often, when we find ourselves hurting, we don't know how to identify that we're hurting. And so it presents in certain ways. And we may come up and we may ask for prayer, but we don't even know how to identify what we actually need prayer for because we haven't identified what we're actually hurting from. And so you can't cast out what you keep feeding through the habits that you keep participating in. You cannot cast out what you keep feeding through the habits that you continue to participate in. So we have come. We have limit. We have rest. And we have hope. But this one's my favorite. Yoke. If we go back to Matthew 11, that's where Jesus said, take my yoke upon you. Now, yoke is for two. And then he said his yoke is easy. Well, why is it easy? It's easy because he's in it with you. Yeah. Burnout really only happens when you decide that you want to carry something that you were meant to co-labor in. Yeah, and so many of y'all have been pulling ministries alone, family alone, purpose alone, all of the things that you were meant to co-labor in. As a matter of fact, God created Eve for Adam because it was not good for man to be alone. But we're the first ones when life gets a little crazy that we want to isolate and we want to be by ourselves and we'll figure it out and I got this, don't worry about me. And then 2 seconds later, ain't nobody called to see about me, ask about me, see what I need, help me, nothing. I'm doing this all by myself. You're going to have to pick your poison. You got to figure it out. Choose a struggle. But the yoke, all he's saying is walk with me and not ahead of me. Yoke, yield. Slow down. Take your time. Observe. Keep the pace. And exhale. The yoke of Jesus is actually alignment, not anxiety. But when we hear yoke, you know, I was like, y'all not equally yoked. Somebody's walking ahead of the other. But when we hear that, it creates this sense of anxiety to literally be attached to somebody else, to do something else. Because you don't know if y'all got the same vision. You don't know if they're going to do it the way that you're doing it. And so that requires collaboration. It requires partnership. It requires communication. And all of those things, sometimes you feel like, I don't got enough time to do all of that. I might as well just do it by myself. But that is not what he's calling us to do. So even if you can't collaborate with this partner, or they are just the most difficult person to partner with, have you tried Jesus? Have you tried his yoke? Have you took it to him to have a conversation about, to figure out how to better navigate? Because if you can't communicate with this person, almost certain Jesus can. I would suggest that you have a conversation with Jesus before you decide to isolate. Because isolation will inflame your exhaustion. But community collaboration, connection will actually calm it. And real healing can happen when you decide that you're going to share the load. Because you really do need people who will remind you of the peace that you forgot how to find. A lot of times, the peace is not too far, but we're so busy isolating. We need the community to remind us of the peace when you forget how to find it. Yoke. Yield. Observe. Keep the pace. And exhale. Soul. Over in Galatians 6 and 9, says, let us not grow weary in doing good. But notice it doesn't really say we'll never get tired, right? It says just don't grow weary. Meaning you can feel it, but don't feed it. Because if you don't pause in private, you'll bleed in public. If you don't pause in private, you will bleed in public. Ministry without margins has a tendency to become misery. And so many of us we've mastered like this public worship, right? But we've neglected the actual private wellness. And so we're around here and we shouting, Lord, use me. If you can use anything, Lord, use me. But then you actually refuse to let him heal what he wants to use. You cannot disciple others through what you refuse to diagnose in yourself. Because what's not defeated will be repeated. And the worst thing that you can do is succeed in public while dying in private. What I found out in personal experiences is that the pulpit isn't really even a place to process the pain. It's actually the place and the platform to pour from wholeness. But where do we go to get the wholeness? If we're the ones in the pulpit. How many of us are actually talking about going to therapy, receiving therapy, having a licensed mental health provider on staff? Because as leaders, we carry a lot. If we think about the church as a hospital, it's where people come. Sick people come to get well. And when we think about a hospital as providers, they tell you don't show up to work sick. Meaning you have to take care of yourself before you come and you provide treatment to those in need. So then where do we go as leaders? Where do we go? And what do we do? And so it is important for us to slow down. Observe what's really happening within ourselves. Unload the unnecessary things that we're holding on to. And just listen for his whisper. That's the soul. Slow down. Observe what's really happening. And unload the unnecessary. And listen for his whisper. How many of you guys are really willing to let God deal with your depth before we decided we're going to perform deliverance for others? That's sticky. That's tough because we're all called. We have a responsibility. But our wholeness and our healing is our responsibility too. And that means stepping outside of our roles as leaders, whatever it may be, to go and get the help. He says seek wise counsel. That's not just your pastor. There is professional help available. Seek it. This takes me to the oxygen mask moment. On an airplane, y'all have all been on an airplane? Anybody have not been on an airplane? By raise a hand. We've all been on an airplane. They tell you to put on your what first? Put on your own oxygen mask first. Because you can't save who you can't breathe around. And so many of us have been spiritually lightheaded, trying to resuscitate others while we're actually suffocating ourselves. Yeah, the kingdom doesn't really need a martyr of exhaustion. What it does need are individuals who are really able to model emotional maturity. Because modeling good health is ministry in and of itself. But how many times do we sacrifice that, thinking that we're doing the God thing, when really it's just a good thing? Yeah. What I kind of found out, though, is that the same God who told you to serve also told you to rest, right? We saw that. So the same God that told you to serve, he told you to rest. And so earlier when I talked about the different types of stewardship, stewardship includes your sanity too. And so before you decide that you're going to actually minister to others, I'm going to need you to minister to your own breath. Put your own oxygen mask on first so that you can breathe before you decide that you're going to build again. How about you decide to pause prior to you pour? Pause prior to you pour. And before you decide to build again, take those deep breaths, the intentional breaths. Give your brain some oxygen. Provide yourself some clarity so that you can think straight, so that you can then go to God. If I'm not mistaken, he said, lean not into your own understanding, but in all the ways acknowledge me, and I will direct your path. He don't want just the big things. He wants the small things too. He said all of your ways. But we only go to him when it's beyond our control, therefore creating more stress for ourselves. Put your own oxygen mask on first. Kingdom alignment. To me, I think this is really important because when Jesus actually said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, what I found out was when you actually put the kingdom first, everything else will find its own rhythm and its own flow. You're not out of alignment because you're tired. You're actually tired because you're out of alignment. A couple of weeks ago, one of the tires on the back of our car kept losing air. We kept putting air in it. And I've been a passenger princess lately. And so I'm on this side of the car where the tire keeps losing air. And so I would look over and I say, we need to put some air in the tire. My husband look over at me like, girl, I wish you'd be quiet. But I am feeling, it feels like this side of the car is doing more work because it's out of alignment. I then realized we're going through gas more quickly. We are literally running out of fuel quickly because there's a misalignment. And if we are not intentional about ensuring our alignment, you're going to wear yourself out real quick, real fast. Seek ye first the kingdom. How many of you find yourself comparing where you are to where someone else is. Oh, okay, all right. Maybe not. You ever compared yourself to yourself? Maybe we'll do that. I thought I would be here by now. Maybe that ain't nobody's story. They might not compare themselves to anybody, but I thought I would be here by now. Right? Yeah. We have the tendency to do that. It's a humanistic thing to do, but if we would just seek ye first the kingdom, I found myself in that space of comparing myself to where I thought that I would be, and I heard him loud and clear say, go back and do the thing I said, well, God, what else you want me to do? I ain't there, so what else you want me to do next? He said, I need you to go back and do the last thing I told you to do. But it took me having to seek him so that everything else would fall into place. Seek ye first the kingdom, not clout, not the crowd, not the comparison, not the but I thought I would be by now. Seek ye first the kingdom, because when the kingdom is first, the rest will find its flow. And so we have come. Cease the overfunction and move towards your ease. We have a limit. Learn intentionally and maintain your internal tranquility. Rest. We want you to release, exhale, surrender, and trust. And then we have the halt. Don't you make any major decisions when you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're lonely, or when you are tired. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yoke. He literally wants you to yield. Slow it down. Observe what's actually happening. Keep the pace and exhale. Because your soul is at stake. So slow down. Observe. Unload. And listen for his whisper. If I could help you to release some things, I would ask that you would declare these declarations and affirmations along with me. Is anybody willing? Okay. I will no longer confuse busyness with belonging. I will no longer mistake exhaustion for anointing. I will choose rest before I rupture. I will breathe before I break. I will walk in rhythm with my Redeemer. And I will lead from a place of overflow, not overwhelmed. I need you guys to be intentional about what you declare and you decree over your life, and especially as leaders. Because your peace is productive. Your stillness is strategic. And rest is really revival. And so hear me. Hear my heart. Leading and bleeding is not noble. It's neglect. And all too often, we see it day in and day out. We have got to change that. We cannot lead others to the living water while being dehydrated from denial. We can't. Heaven is literally calling on you, encouraging you to breathe again, encouraging you to believe again, encouraging you to find balance, because all of that is your portion. And whoever made you believe that it wasn't, tell them to take it up with your daddy. Because literally the same Messiah who saves souls will also safeguard your sanity. The same Messiah who saved your soul will safeguard your sanity. He does not intend for us to be around here going through it the way that we've been going through it. That is not his desire for us. So put on your oxygen mask of worship. Put on your oxygen mask of wisdom. And put on your oxygen mask of wellness. And then you proceed to lead from your own.